If you ever heard a story that touches your heart and stays with you for days, maybe whispering in your thoughts late at night, then I want you to stay with me. And before I begin, tell me in the comments if you've ever heard a story like this before, or if you've ever seen love change someone's heart. I am not here to blame or shout or point fingers. I am here to share. And maybe when you hear my story, you will understand a mother's heart a little better. My name is Margaret. I am 73 years old. I am a mother of 3, and for many years, I believed I had the perfect little family. People used to tell me I was blessed. I used to smile proudly and say, yes, God has been very kind. I used to cook breakfast every morning in a little yellow kitchen that smelled like coffee and butter, and I would wait for the sound of small feet running down the stairs. I made lunches, I packed bags, I kissed foreheads before school, I wiped tears after small accidents, and hugged away nightmares. My children were my world, and I tried to give them everything I never had. When you are a mother, you never imagine a day when the house will be quiet. You do not think about empty chairs at the dinner table. You do not think about silence becoming your closest companion. You only see chubby hands reaching for yours. You see celebrations, birthdays, graduations. You see future smiles. You do not imagine tears. But life does not always move the way dreams do. Sometimes I sit by my living room window, the one facing the small maple tree in our yard, and I think about those early mornings, the laughter, the mess, the noise. I remember my youngest son throwing cereal on the floor because he was convinced Cheerios could bounce like little rubber balls. I remember my daughter brushing her doll's hair at breakfast, telling me she wanted to be a mommy like me one day. I remember my oldest son, quiet and thoughtful, always reading, always dreaming big. I called him my little professor. And somewhere along the way, time moved faster than I could hold it. My children grew, their interests changed, their world expanded, and mine slowly shrank. I was still their mother, but not the center anymore. And that is natural. That is life. Children are supposed to grow and leave, but nobody prepares you for the loneliness that follows. Nobody tells you how long the days feel when the house that once echoed with laughter becomes a place where clocks are the loudest sound. I used to tell myself, they're busy, they have jobs and responsibilities and dreams to chase. I understood. I always understood. A mother always understands. But understanding does not erase longing. I waited for calls. I waited for visits. I waited for a knock on the door on holidays or birthdays or even without a reason, just to say, "Hi, Mom, how are you?" But my phone stopped ringing often. Messages became shorter. Visits became rare. Sometimes months passed without seeing them. Once, I sat with the phone in my hand for hours, just looking at their names and wondering if I should dial. But I didn't. I didn't want to sound needy. Mothers are supposed to be strong, aren't they? We are the ones our children run to for support, not the ones who ask for it. Years passed. One by one, they built their own families. My daughter married first, moved across the country. My older son started a business. My youngest found a job in another state. They promised they would come back often. They didn't. And every time they said, "Sorry, Mom, next time," I smiled and said, "It's okay," because mothers learn to smile through pain. We learn not to show disappointment, but inside, a small ache grew. I filled my days with small routines, watering my little garden, knitting blankets that nobody needed, baking pies that I often finished alone. I watched families walking outside and wondered if one day my children would walk beside me again. I kept their rooms untouched, thinking maybe they'd want to feel like children again when they visited. They never asked about their rooms. One winter morning, I remember sitting at my dining table, stirring tea slowly, watching the steam rise like fragile hope. Snow was falling outside, gentle and quiet. I thought about Christmas mornings when the house smelled like cinnamon and my children tore wrapping paper with bright eyes. That year, I ate alone. Not a single footstep came through the door. Not a single voice called to say, "Mom, we're coming." I told myself not to cry, but tears came anyway. They came softly, like snowflakes melting on warm skin. They tasted like years of memories, like lullabies, like nights spent awake worrying about fevers and school projects and heartbreaks. A mother's tears hold entire histories. The neighbors sometimes asked, "Do your children visit?" I smiled politely and said, "Yes, they're busy, but they call." I lied. I lied to protect my pride, and maybe theirs too. Nobody wants to admit being forgotten by the very people they raised. One day, after years of rare contact, I got a call, but not the kind I had hoped. It was my oldest son. His voice sounded different. He was nervous, rushed. He said, "Mom, we need to talk." I held my breath. For a moment, I thought maybe he was coming to visit. Instead, he said, "We've been thinking maybe you shouldn't live alone anymore." They weren't worried about me. They were worried about inconvenience. I could hear it in his tone. They didn't offer to bring me home. They didn't ask what I wanted. They suggested I move to a senior facility, not out of love, but out of duty, a duty that felt heavy for them. I said gently, "I'm fine here. This is my home." He sighed. "Mom, it's just better. We can't keep checking on you." They rarely checked anyway. I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, but quietly, like an old picture frame falling. I did not argue. I simply listened, and when the call ended, I sat in silence. The house felt colder that evening. The walls felt farther away.
"It will be better for her," she whispered to my son, as if I wasn't standing right there. I smiled instead of crying. I kept my voice steady. "It's okay. I understand." In my heart, I whispered, "I raised you. I loved you. I held you before you could walk, and now you cannot hold space for me." But I did not say it aloud. A mother's pride is a fragile thing, built from sacrifices nobody sees. I packed some things. I left the rest. They moved me to a quiet senior living place. It was clean, calm, safe. The staff was kind, but it was not home. Home has memories. Home has echoes. Home breathes with the laughter that once lived inside it. This place, it was only walls. I did not resent my children. I couldn't. Love does not disappear just because attention does, but a quiet sadness followed me from room to room. At night, when the hallways were silent and I heard wheelchairs rolling softly outside, I thought of my babies, their first words, their school plays, their scraped knees, and I wondered, do they remember too? Or am I a chapter they closed long ago? Sometimes people in the facility spoke about their families visiting. Some said their children came weekly. Some cried because they had no one left. I sat between those worlds, remembered but rarely reached, alive in their lives but not present. I waited. Days, months, seasons changed outside my window like slow turning pages in a forgotten book. I saw spring flowers bloom, then wilt. I saw autumn leaves fall gently, like tired memories drifting down. Winter came again, and still no footsteps, no hugs, no laughter calling, "Mom, we're here." But time has a quiet way of circling back. One afternoon, the sky was painted soft blue, clouds drifting lazily. I was sitting in the common garden, knitting, breathing the fresh air. I heard footsteps behind me, 3 sets, familiar and unsure. When I turned, my heart paused. My children stood there, older, heavier with life, not smiling, not confident, but nervous, almost trembling. For a moment I could not speak. I only stared, trying to believe they were real. My daughter's voice broke first. "Mom, can we talk?" My youngest son's eyes glistened. My oldest looked down, his jaw tight. Something had shifted. Something had brought them here. Not duty this time, but realization. Maybe guilt. Maybe love waking up after a long sleep. I did not ask why they came. A mother does not question the return of her children. She simply receives it. I opened my arms. They came close, slowly at first, then faster, like children again. They hugged me. I felt warmth I had missed for years. Their tears fell on my shoulder. Mine stayed in my heart, quiet, deep, overflowing. They said, "We're sorry. We should have been here." My oldest finally met my eyes. "Mom, we messed up. We forgot what's important." My youngest said softly, "We want to bring you home." Home. The word felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. I smiled, not out of victory, not out of pride, but out of pure love, because mothers do not hold grudges. We hold moments. We hold hopes. And when they return, we open the door wide without asking why they left. I took their hands. I said, "I never stopped waiting, and I never stopped loving you." They helped me pack my little things again, this time carefully, lovingly. They carried my bags. They held my arms. They spoke gently, like they were afraid to lose me again. When we drove back to my old house, the neighborhood looked the same. The maple tree was taller. The porch creaked the same soft hello under my feet. The door opened to a space filled with dust, but also memories. They cleaned with me. They laughed. They argued playfully over where the old furniture should go. They asked me what I liked. They listened. As evening settled, my daughter started cooking. My son set the table. The house smelled like it used to. Warmth, food, belonging. I sat at the table and watched them move around my kitchen, talking, smiling. And I realized sometimes people find their way back, not because we push them, but because love waits quietly, without bitterness. Later that night, when the house was quiet again, I sat by the same living room window where I once waited alone. But now, instead of emptiness, my heart felt full. The ache did not vanish, but it softened. It became a reminder, not of loss, but of love's endurance. You may wonder why I forgave them so easily. The world often tells us to demand apologies, to protect our pride, to walk away when hurt. But motherhood does not work like that. Not real motherhood. Our hearts break quietly, and they heal quietly too. We do not love in halves. We love whole, even when pieces are missing. I am not here to teach a lesson. I am not here to say what is right or wrong. I am only here to tell you what happened and how it felt. And if someone listening is a parent, maybe you understand. If someone listening is a child, maybe you will remember to call home. Today, my children visit often. They bring their kids. They help with groceries. They call me just to ask, "Mom, are you okay?" And every time I hear their voices, my heart whispers, "Thank you. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for remembering." I sit on my porch now sometimes, wrapped in a warm shawl, watching little grandchildren run in my yard. They call me Grandma, and they tug at my hands just like their parents once did. And in those moments, I know that life has given me another chance to feel joy again. Some evenings, I still sit alone by the window. Silence still comes, but it no longer feels like abandonment. It feels like peace, like the quiet that follows a storm you survived, like breath after tears, like the gentle hum of a life lived fully, even through pain. If you asked me what I learned, I would tell you this: love does not disappear when forgotten. It waits, it softens, it forgives, not because it is weak, but because it is strong enough to outlive mistakes. So if you are listening to this, wherever you are, and you have someone waiting for your call, someone's love you once took for granted, reach out. Not tomorrow, today. Life is shorter than we think, and love is quieter than it deserves to be. But it is still there, patient and steady, hoping. And if you are a mother, sitting alone somewhere, wondering if your children will ever come back to you, hold on. Your love is not wasted. Your sacrifices are not forgotten. Sometimes hearts take time to wake up, but love leaves a mark that memory cannot erase. My children forgot me once, but they remembered eventually. And when they returned, I did not open the door with anger. I opened it with love, because that is what mothers do. That is what I will always do. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart even a little, tell me, have you ever seen love find its way back after being lost? Share below.
Phones stay silent when hearts forget. Doors remain closed when love turns heavy. Yet, every morning I still stood by the window, looking down the empty street, hoping to see familiar faces walking toward me. Hope is a stubborn thing. It refuses to leave, even when everyone else does. One cold evening, I sat near the heater, knitting a small scarf. Winter was coming, and for years I made scarves for my children. They never wore them, but I made them anyway. Because love doesn't disappear just because people do. I smiled at that thought. Strange how heartache can create strength you never knew you had. That night, as I drank tea, warmth spread through my chest. Not from the tea, but from acceptance. Maybe they didn't mean to hurt me. Maybe life distracted them. People change. Priorities change. But a mother's heart? No. It only learns to wait quietly. Even patience has a heartbeat. And then,
One morning, many months later, I heard a car outside. My heart froze. Feet rushed to the window even before my mind could think. A familiar face stepped out. My hands trembled. My breath caught in my throat. I whispered, "Is it really? After all this time?" The doorbell rang. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I simply walked slowly, like someone afraid this moment might vanish if they hurried. I opened the door gently, and there he was, my eldest son, older, thinner, tired in the eyes. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at me as if searching for permission to exist again in my world. I waited quietly, the way mothers do. Finally, he opened his mouth, and a shaky voice escaped him. "Mom, can I come in?" My heart broke and healed in the same second. I didn't ask him why he left. I didn't ask why it took so long. I didn't question his silence or his absence. I only stepped aside and said softly, "You never needed to ask." He took one step inside, and suddenly he broke. He leaned into me, shoulders shaking, tears falling like he had been holding them for years. I held him, gently. Mother's arms remember, even when memory forgets. I whispered, "You came back. That's enough." Forgiveness is not weakness. Forgiveness is what makes us human. As he cried, I looked past him at the door, and I wondered, would the others come too someday? Maybe, maybe not. But in that moment, I realized something. Love does not measure time. Love simply waits and opens the door when it finally hears the knock. My son stayed with me that whole day. We sat together in the living room, just like we used to when he was little. No loud voices, no dramatic apologies, no blaming, just silence and warmth, like someone trying to relearn how to breathe in a place they once called home. He made tea for us. He asked where I kept the sugar, even though he already knew. And somehow, that small question felt like a bandage on an old wound. When he placed the cup in front of me, his hands trembled. He whispered, "Mom, I thought about calling you so many times, but I was scared." I asked gently, "Scared of what?" He said, "Scared you wouldn't want me anymore." That sentence, it broke something inside me and mended something too. A mother never stops wanting her children, even when they go far, even when they forget, even when they return only with their shadows. We talked slowly, in soft breaths and broken pauses. He told me life wasn't as perfect as he once imagined. He said he had spent years chasing things that didn't matter, only to realize the person who mattered the most was sitting alone at a quiet kitchen table waiting. I didn't say he was wrong.
I didn't tell him it hurt. Sometimes silence is the only language kindness needs. As evening painted the walls gold, he stood up and said, "I'll come again tomorrow, if you'll have me." I smiled gently. "You don't need tomorrow to come home. You can always stay." He hugged me again. A real hug this time. Not rushed, not polite, but one that felt like a child finding shelter after a storm. When he left, I watched him walk to the gate, and I whispered to the wind, "Thank you for bringing at least one back." The house was still quiet, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. And then, 2 days later, something unexpected happened. I heard voices outside my window, soft, hesitant footsteps. A familiar tone, one I hadn't heard in years. I opened the door, and there they were. My daughter and her little boy. She didn't look like the confident woman who once walked away without turning back. She looked tired, fragile.
Eyes heavy, shoulders slumped, lips shaking as if they forgot how to form the right words. Her son, my grandson, hid behind her, peeking at me with big, unsure eyes. My daughter took a breath, and her voice cracked. "Mom, I didn't know how much I missed peace until I lost it." I felt the earth pause for a second. She didn't ask to enter. She didn't try to explain everything at once. She just stood there, with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes, waiting, like a child afraid she might not be welcome anymore. So I stepped forward, and instead of speaking, I opened my arms. She fell into them shaking. Her son came closer, holding her dress, looking confused but safe. I touched his hair gently. "Do you know who I am?" I asked softly. He nodded slowly. "Mom says you're the person who loves people even when they forget." That single sentence was enough to fill my eyes with tears. Children understand truth in ways adults forget. We all sat inside, and for a long time no one spoke. We didn't need to. Love can speak without sound. Later, as they were leaving, my daughter held my hand. "Mom," she whispered, "I thought I had time. I thought one day I'd come, but one day became years. I am sorry." I kissed her forehead. Time can build distance, but love can cross it. She cried quietly. A different kind of crying. Not sadness, not regret, but relief. As their car drove away, I looked up at the sky and thought, maybe some stories don't end with loss. Maybe some begin again where pain used to live. Days passed, and one by one, the others came too. Not all at once, not perfectly. Some came with guilt, some came with shame, some only to see if I would turn them away. But I didn't. My door stayed open. My heart stayed soft. Because healing doesn't need pride, only patience. And slowly, my house, once filled with silence, began to fill with voices again. Laughter returned, footsteps returned, even small arguments returned, and they felt strangely comforting. Because where there is love, there is life. Where there is forgiveness, There is home. I realized something then. They didn't just return to me.
They returned to themselves. And I returned to being a mother who wasn't waiting in the dark anymore. I was once forgotten, but I forgave. And because I forgave, I was remembered again. Sometimes love leaves, but when you keep the door unlocked, it always finds its way back. Life felt different after that. The mornings didn't feel as quiet. The afternoons didn't stretch endlessly like long shadows on the floor. And at night, when I sat near the window with a cup of warm tea, I didn't stare at the empty road hoping a familiar face might appear. I began to sleep again, not because I was tired, but because my heart finally rested. Sometimes my son would stop by after work, bringing fresh bread like he used to when he was young. Sometimes my daughter would call me with her little boy laughing in the background. Some days they just came to sit near me. No talk, no reason, just presence. Do you know how healing presence can be? It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't judge. It doesn't remind you of wounds. It just stays quietly. One evening, my grandson sat beside me in the garden, legs swinging off the chair, sunlight catching in his hair like gold dust. "Grandma?" he asked, looking serious in a way children rarely do. "Yes, love?" "Why didn't you get angry when everyone left?" I didn't answer right away. I let the wind speak first. Warm, gentle, moving the leaves around us like soft whispers from the past. Then I smiled. "Because anger pushes people away," I said. "And sometimes love needs to sit quietly and wait." He hummed, as if trying to understand something bigger than himself. Children feel truth before they can explain it. He leaned his head on my arm. "I hope I never make you wait." I kissed the top of his hair. I whispered, "You already came. That is enough." Sometimes healing doesn't happen when apologies arrive. Sometimes healing happens when innocence touches wounds better than words ever could. The years that followed were gentle, not perfect, not always peaceful. Families are rivers, sometimes smooth, sometimes crashing, always moving. There were still disagreements. There were still days when someone spoke too quickly or misunderstood or forgot to call. But there was love again. And once love returns, everything else becomes manageable. I often sat at the same window where I once waited alone. But now I didn't wait with hope or pain. I sat with gratitude. The door that once felt like a reminder of absence now felt like a symbol of return. The table that once held one cup of tea now held many, sometimes messy, sometimes loud, always full. There were evenings when all my children gathered around me, voices overlapping, laughter rising, stories flowing like music, and I would sit quietly watching them, not joining every conversation, not needing to speak to feel seen, just watching, breathing in the joy that once felt like a memory. One night, as they prepared to leave, my daughter hugged me a little tighter than usual. "You know," she whispered, "if you had turned us away, we would have never forgiven ourselves."
I held her face gently. If I had turned you away, I would have never forgiven myself either. She closed her eyes and inhaled slowly, as if trying to take the moment into her soul. There is a kind of peace that doesn't shout. It just sits quietly beside you, like an old friend who knows every chapter of your life and still chooses to stay. When the house emptied again and silence returned, it no longer felt empty. It felt like a song after the music ends, still echoing softly in the heart. I walked to the door, touched the wood softly, and whispered almost to myself, "You came back. That was enough." I didn't need grand gestures. I didn't need perfect endings. I didn't need every day to be full. I just needed to know that love doesn't disappear. It wanders, it grows up, it gets confused, it falls, and finds its way again. And sometimes it returns quietly, with tired eyes and trembling hands, hoping the door is still open. My door was open. My heart was open. And because of that, my life became full again. If someone ever asked me why I forgave so easily, I would simply say, because love is not a transaction. Love is a home, and homes aren't meant to shut their doors forever. In the end, I didn't win by holding on to pain. I won by letting go, by choosing softness in a world that often praises steel hearts. And one quiet evening, as I folded blankets and turned off lights, I realized something. I didn't just get my children back. I found myself again. The mother who believed in love more than pride. The woman who trusted silence more than punishment. The heart that stayed gentle even when it broke. And if I had the chance to live it all again, the hurt, the waiting, the hope, I would. Because sometimes the longest journeys end at the same door where they began. And sometimes the greatest love story is simply a mother waiting, with a light on, whispering to the night, "When you're ready, I'll be here."